Example 5 and 11.1, finally the last example, I know there's a lot for this section, talks about using cases, and typically you require a case where because of some kind of restriction, if you make one selection, it limits the kind of future possible selections. The other concept that I'd like to talk about cases is that within the case, we are making one selection and another selection and a selection, and then case by case, I'm doing case 1 or case 2. And the reason why I'm pushing that and or so much is that mathematically, and really represents multiplication, and or represents addition. So if we talk about, rolling a dice or flipping a coin, there are 8 possibilities. The 1 through 6 on a standard dice, and then the heads or the tails on the coin. But if I talk about rolling a dice and flipping a coin, there's 12 possibilities, which is the 6 possibilities from the dice multiplied by the 2 possibilities from the coin. And that's a subtle thing that you've been taught in, I think, junior high, but it's been a while since you've used it. So I'd like to really, really push the concept that case by case we add, within the cases we multiply. And so the case or the situation they want us to come up with is how many different 3-digit even numbers greater than 300 can you make using the digits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, the reason this requires cases, where you're making a 3-digit even number, there's a couple different restrictions here. The number has to be greater than 300, and it also has to be even. And I'd like to put in that the only way it's even is if the last number is even. Right, 302 or 304 or 306 are all even because the final digit is even. But because it has to be greater than 300, this first number can only be the 3, the 4, the 5, or the 6. Now, this is why we need cases. What if I use the 6 first? Well, then I can only choose from the 2 or the 4 for the last digit. But if I use the 5 first, I can choose from the 2, the 4, or the 6 for the last digit. And that's why we need 2 different cases. Now, in some of these questions, you could do 3 or 4 cases. We typically want to make that as simple as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up 2 cases. I'm going to call it case 1, and I'm just going to put in a bracket. I'm going to say we use an even number first, and then case 2 is going to be where we use an odd number first. Now, you do not have to define the cases when you're doing one of these questions. I just think it's very useful to do so, at least initially. Now, the one thing I'm going to do to try to remind myself right away is that I am going to add between these cases. Within the case, I'll be doing some multiplication. So for case 1, I'm going to use an even number first. I'm just going to put that there's 3 options. So let's deal with the even number first. If the first number is going to be even, I'll write the even numbers here, which are 2, 4, and 6, but I cannot choose the number 2. Because it has to be greater than 300. So there are 2 choices for my first digit. Now, because I have used the 4 or the 6, I can only choose from the 2, and I'll write 2, 4, and 6. Those are the even numbers, but I have used one of the 4 or the 6. And again, I recommend just crossing out the first one you see. So if I can choose from the 2 or the 6, I have 2 options for the last number. Now, for that number in the middle, we had the digits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We have now used 2 of those numbers. Now, we've used even numbers, so I'm going to cross out the 2, I'm going to cross out the 4, and we now see for the number in the middle, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 options. So the number of numbers, which I know sounds a little weird, that are greater than 300 and even, that start with an even number, are 2 times 4 times 2, which is equal to 16. All right, so there are 16 unique possibilities in case 1. Notice how I multiplied within the case because I'm choosing the first digit and the second digit and the third digit. Or I'm doing what we're describing in case 2, and I'm going to use a different color for it. In case 2, we are using an odd number first. Now I'm going to write the odd numbers. There's 1, 3, and 5, but the number has to be greater than 300. So I cannot select the number 1. So I have 2 choices. All right, there is still a restriction here. I have to make sure that this is an even number. So the final digit could be a 2, a 4, or a 6. That means that there's 3 options there, which means the number in the middle, I could normally choose for 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, my 4 got a little weird there. 5 or 6. But what I've done is I've used an odd number, a 3 or a 5. So I'll just cross out the 3. And I've used an even number, the 2, the 4, or the 6. So I'll cross out a 2. So we have 4 options for the middle. Well, again, I'm multiplying these. So 2 times 4 is 8. 8 times 3 is 24. There are 16 possibilities in the first case, 24 possibilities in the second case. So I am going to put the total possible, and I'll write it out, is going to be case 1 plus case 2, which for this question will be 16 plus 24. There are 40 different unique numbers that are greater than 300, even, and only use the digits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Unless they specifically tell you otherwise, repetition is not allowed. So I couldn't use the 4 twice or the 6 twice or anything along those lines. Try to think of them as, Scrabble tiles, where once you've used one, you physically no longer have that object to choose from or to put in position. All right, that is the end of 11.1 here. It's a tricky start to Chapter 11 for sure. Chapter 11 is not as brutal as it might seem initially. It takes a lot of practice, and it really does tend to click around 11.2 or so. The assignment for 11.1 is on the board, or on the video, I guess. Make sure you check Google Classroom for the modifications that we have made.